When it comes to making flying games, Flipfly LLC have been at it for many years, with their best known title probably being Race the Sun, a game that I've played lots of times over many years and failed quite miserably. Well, they're back now with Whisker Squadron Survivor, the first in a collection of games under the Whisker Squadron brand, which will see feline pilots take to the skies in, you guessed it, another flying game. This one, though, is a little bit more Starfoxian than anything else that's out there to date from the team, and what it does is it places you into like a retro synthwave futuristic environment, but again in a corridor shooter style aesthetic. Flying forward, trying to avoid procedurally generated buildings for a roguelite environment that lasts about 30 minutes per run. The idea is that you choose your feline friend and a loadout of 2 different weapons and then take to the skies so that you can then try and survive 10 zones or 10 levels of randomly generated content. This means that you'll be flying up, down, left and right with inversed controls. Oh yes, that suits me. I know it doesn't suit everyone. But you'll be trying to avoid all different types of buildings and blocks in your way, and you'll also have the ability to bank heavily to the left and right, as most of those kind of corridor flying games do, so that you can take really tight, twisty turns with aplomb and precision. However, unlike most of the other games that Flipfly do, you can shoot. And that means that you will be busy attacking and killing various different swarms of bugs, but they're again done in this kind of synthwave feel. Reminds me a little bit of the Darius games, where all of the enemies in that game are fish. Here, it's all bugs. So you've got like bees or swarms of like flies going around. Then there's larvae coming in from the skies, and whilst they initially don't really attack you directly, at least until the later levels, what you do have to do is clear them within a specific time period, because they then get more aggressive the longer they're on the screen for. So the swarms of bees and flies will start to send projectiles towards you. The larvae will stand still and start to like sending a homing laser missile at you, which is quite difficult to avoid. And other things will just charge at you the longer that they stay on screen for. As you go through the levels, more and more of these different enemies become apparent and they get more aggressive. So some will charge at you and then float around on the screen. And then there'll be like bigger boss versions of themselves that will fly around the screen that you'll need to kill as well. Levels can have multiple bosses in, which was something that took me a while to get used to, and I feel like the difficulty is slightly tied to how you level up in the game, which is an interesting mechanic. As all of the different enemies are killed, it will then leave behind like this blue collectible currency that you need to fly through and collect. But if you miss it because you are busy aiming at one side of the screen and you're on the other, you aren't getting any of that juiciness for upgrading your ship. And so you'll see the upgrade counter on the left-hand side as you move through the zone. And once that hits the top, that will then give you a choice of one of three power-ups that you can then level up your ship. So again, more procedural generation, more tailored rogueliteness to you. Some of these power-ups will include increasing the level of one of your 2 weapons, your firing rate. It can increase the hull and health of your ship, the recharge speed of your shield, and also the recharge and size of your energy, because when you shoot, you deplete energy, and when you boost to try and get yourself out of tight situations, again, that depletes energy. So you can't just go in all guns blazing. You have to make sure that you shoot tactically as you go around. It's not like you can only do one shot and that's it, but you can have to like fire 2 or 3 and then move out of the way, recharge for a few seconds and then come back. How you build out your ship will depend on what's given to you, but there's a lot of different options to choose from and a lot of variety, and that was really what kept me coming back to Whisker Squadron Survivor over and over again, was that because of the amount of options that were available were quite vast, I could attack the game in different ways and they all felt kind of viable. The main caveat to that is your base weapon. Now, when you start off on this game, you're given a single kind of shot that goes through like your standard pistol. It's absolutely awful. It does barely any damage. It's a real struggle to try and it's not the easiest weapon to kind of learn to play the game with, whereas the shotgun is like blatantly overpowered and you can get really, really far by doing quite terribly with that. And so whilst this game is coming out into early access soon in 2023, there's still definitely some balancing issues that will need to be addressed over time. The other thing I'd say as well is that I'm not sure the grind between collecting XP through repeated runs and getting your base level stats increased is quite right either, because it will give you additional ammo for some of your secondary weapons that act like homing missiles that are triggered when you get a combo, for example. Some of your base shield can be upgraded and so on and so forth, but it feels quite slow to get some of those upgrades, and maybe instead of having like you must always spend 10 or 20,000 to get a certain upgrade, you should have like those first upgrades being slightly cheaper and then the further ones to make it better longer, so that it feels like you're making progress quicker in the game. Because I could see the first hour or two of this being quite dry for a lot of people before it starts to get good, if that makes sense. Whilst there are some additional pilots and some additional weapons that you can unlock, there's only a few of them, and I'd like to see that expanded, I think, over time and too, depending on what the price point of this game is going to eventually be. But fundamentally, the soundness in the shooting and flying mechanics are really solid here. So it's all about tinkering around the edges to make sure that the balance of the grind and the way how the enemies interact and kind of come together all makes sense. Because I found some runs to be really, really difficult and engaging. Other runs, sometimes there would be no enemies appearing at all for most of it, and I was like, something's gone wrong here. And it's just that needs fixing as it goes through early access, which I'm sure FlipFire will do. Written review will be over on highplanegames.com at a later date. Any comments or questions, leave them down below. Bye. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/Higher Plane Network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.